The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly in every direction. It was supposed to be peaceful, serene even. But for Commander Alex Rider, the silence was suffocating. His small spacecraft, the Cassandra, was alone in the endless void, far from Earth and the familiar hum of human life. Alex had seen the stars countless times, but never like this. This isolation, this vast, cold stillness, was different. His mission was routine, just a simple orbit around the outer edge of the solar system, a research assignment that would take weeks. But something had felt off from the moment he left the safety of Earth's atmosphere. He sat at the controls, eyes scanning the monitors, fingers lightly tapping on the side of his chair. A dull, repetitive beeping from the console was the only sound, signaling that the ship's systems were running smoothly. But his mind was elsewhere, distracted, restless. Every few minutes, his gaze would drift to the viewports. The stars glowed brightly, unblinking and distant. There was something unnerving about how still everything was. As though it was all watching him. "Focus, Alex," he muttered to himself, shaking his head. Nothing out of the ordinary. He had no reason to feel this way. The Cassandra was one of the best ships in the fleet, designed to withstand the rigors of deep space. His mission, while important, was hardly groundbreaking. He was just gathering data, nothing more. Or so he thought. The first signal came in the dead of night, if the term could even apply in space. It was an anomaly, a slight shift in the background radiation. A flicker. He glanced at the console, frowning. No known source of this disturbance existed. It wasn't a meteor, it wasn't an asteroid, there were no nearby stars going nova, nothing that could account for it. Alex leaned forward, staring at the blinking red dot on the radar screen. It was moving, but far too slowly to be an object of any real size. He double-checked the ship's instruments, ensuring there were no errors. He activated the ship's communication system, trying to reach Earth's command center. "Cassandra to Earth Command, come in." There was nothing but static in response. He tried again, louder this time. "Cassandra to Earth Command, this is Commander Alex Rider. Do you copy?" The static persisted. The eerie quiet of space surrounded him, amplified by the failure of all communication. His pulse quickened as he sat back in his chair, his mind racing. This was not normal. The Cassandra was equipped with backup communication systems, designed to function in just such a situation. But all of them were failing. He ran through the diagnostics again, checking for any sign of system malfunction. The ship's power levels were stable, but the external communication arrays remained silent. His instincts told him to stay calm, to trust the systems, but the feeling of being utterly alone in space, cut off from the rest of humanity, was creeping into his thoughts. Minutes felt like hours. He pulled up the data on the anomaly again. It was still there, just at the edge of the system's outer perimeter. The strange signal was getting closer. Slowly. Too slowly for anything natural. His hand hovered over the controls. Should he investigate? Should he continue his mission or cut it short and head back? He tried to convince himself it was a glitch, a temporary disruption. But the pull to explore, to understand what was happening, was irresistible. "I'm going in," he said aloud, as if trying to convince himself. He set a course toward the source of the signal. The ship's engines hummed softly as they powered up, pushing the Cassandra forward. The anomaly was still faint on the radar, but it was definitely moving. Alex adjusted the trajectory, his fingers dancing across the console with the precision of years of training. As the ship moved deeper into the void, the stars outside seemed to grow more distant, more indifferent. But the signal, whatever it was getting louder. Clearer. Suddenly, the radar screen flashed. Alex's heart skipped a beat. The signal wasn't just growing stronger, it was coming from something. Something large. Something alive. His hands gripped the controls. The temperature in the cockpit seemed to drop several degrees as the ship neared the coordinates. The exterior lights flickered once, then returned to normal. But the strange presence he felt growing stronger with each passing second couldn't be ignored. The signal wasn't just technological, it had a pulse, a rhythm, a pattern that felt almost deliberate. "That's not a ship," Alex muttered, his voice low. The anomaly, whatever it was, wasn't something that belonged to the natural world. It was designed. The frequency was too precise, too controlled. The thought made his skin crawl. And then, without warning, a flash of blinding light filled the cockpit. Alex slammed his hands to his eyes, but it was already gone. The whole ship vibrated violently. His head whipped forward as the ship lurched, knocking him against the harness. He fought to regain control, his heart pounding in his chest. The warning lights blared. The instruments showed erratic readings. It was as if the fabric of space itself had shifted. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. He checked the console. The radar was silent now. The signal was gone. He quickly glanced outside, but saw nothing. The deep space surrounding him was as dark and still as before. No sign of a ship. No sign of anything. Yet the sensation of being watched lingered. Alex's breathing was shallow as he tried to steady himself. "Come on, Ryder. Get a grip." He gripped the controls again, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there, something that had made its presence known. He tried to recalibrate the ship's systems, but the display refused to cooperate. It was as if the ship itself was in disarray, disconnected from the universe. Then came the message. It appeared on the comm screen out of nowhere, blinking once before the alien text filled the screen. The strange symbols began to shift, rearranging themselves before they became readable. "We know who you are. You will not be allowed to forget." Alex froze. The message was brief, but it hit him like a physical blow. His eyes scanned the words again, but there was no mistaking them. This wasn't just a communication, it was a warning. A warning that something far greater than him, greater than humanity, was aware of their existence. The transmission ended abruptly, cutting off as suddenly as it had appeared. Alex's hands trembled as he reached for the console. He tried to send a response, but the system remained frozen. Then, the ship's lights flickered once again. A deep, rumbling hum filled the air, a low vibration that seemed to come from everywhere. Alex's stomach churned as he felt the ship being pulled by an unseen force. He looked up, his heart racing. And there it was. In the distance, just outside the range of his instruments, a shape began to materialize in the void, a massive, shadowy figure, its outline impossible to define against the blackness of space. It loomed silently, watching. The Cassandra rocked again, harder this time, as if the ship itself were responding to the presence. Alex stared at the figure, his mind frozen in disbelief. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. There was only one thought that rang out in his mind. They were here. And they were not alone. The silence was suffocating. Commander Alex Ryder's heart thundered in his chest as the cockpit of the Cassandra plunged into darkness. The artificial lights, which had once illuminated the instruments and provided a sense of order, were now completely gone. His only companion was the faint, deep hum vibrating through the ship's hull. It wasn't the hum of the engines, no, the engines had long since fallen silent. This sound was something far more ominous, an unfamiliar, low-pitched vibration, like the pulse of some ancient, unearthly force. Alex's breath caught in his throat. He instinctively reached for the control panel in front of him, his fingers tracing over the smooth surface, desperate for any sign that the ship's systems were still functional. He pressed a few buttons, but the console remained dead. Nothing. Panic gnawed at the edges of his mind, but he forced himself to breathe. This wasn't the first time he'd faced a crisis in space, but something about this felt different. This wasn't just malfunction or technical failure. No, this was something more, something far beyond human comprehension. "Focus, Alex," he whispered to himself. "You've handled worse." He quickly unclipped his harness, his hands shaking as he floated toward the backup emergency lights. The glow from his flashlight pierced the darkness, revealing the stark emptiness of the cockpit. He could feel the cold creeping in, even though the ship's heating systems had been designed to withstand the harshness of space. The tension in the air was palpable, like a string stretched too tightly, about to snap. For a long moment, Alex did nothing but float in place, staring at the dead console, hoping, praying that it would come back online. But there was nothing. No signals. No transmissions. No sign of life. Then, the hum returned. But this time, it was different. It was louder. Alex's eyes shot toward the viewports. The vast expanse of space outside the ship had become darker, as though something was blocking the stars. His heart skipped a beat as a shadow, large and foreboding, seemed to loom on the edge of his vision. He leaned closer to the window, staring into the abyss of deep space. What was it? Was it just his mind playing tricks on him, or was something actually out there? The shadow was growing. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead as the outline of a massive, incomprehensible shape began to form, shifting in the blackness. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before, too large to be any natural celestial body, too precise in its edges to be a random formation of dust or gas. It was deliberate. He grabbed the flashlight and floated over to the communications panel. Maybe he could get something out, anything. The equipment was still malfunctioning, but there had to be something he could do. But as his fingers grazed the buttons, a sudden flash of static rippled across the comm screen. Then, a voice that was not his own, spoke. "We are watching." The voice was clear, but distorted, as though coming through a tunnel. The words were short, clipped, but they rang with a chilling finality. Alex froze, the blood draining from his face. His hands trembled, and the flashlight slipped from his grasp, tumbling into the dark. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry, the words caught in his chest. The voice had come from nowhere, and yet, it felt all-encompassing. It wasn't a broadcast from any ship he recognized. It wasn't human. "We are watching." The voice repeated itself, sending a chill down Alex's spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that they, the ones who spoke, were not speaking to him, but to humanity as a whole. It was as though the words were meant for everyone, not just him alone. And then, it stopped. The silence returned, more oppressive than ever. Alex floated back to the window, his breath shallow. The shadow outside was closer now, unmistakably massive and just, there. It wasn't moving, not in the traditional sense. It hovered at the edge of his perception, like a dark void that had no shape, no real form, but was undeniably present. "Why?" Alex muttered under his breath. "What do you want from me?" There was no response. The hum grew louder again, but this time, it seemed to be emanating from within the ship itself. It resonated through the walls, vibrating the entire vessel. As if the ship itself was being pulled towards the shadow in the distance. Alex's pulse quickened. He had to act. Quickly, he strapped himself back into his seat, his hands working to override the system's lockout. His mind raced as he attempted to regain control. If the ship's systems were still intact, there had to be a way to force a manual reboot. There had to be a way to communicate with Earth, or at least to escape. The screen blinked to life again, but it wasn't the familiar interface he was used to. The symbols were foreign, alien. Lines and shapes shifted across the screen in a pattern that made no sense to him. He was staring at something far beyond human technology. Then, the voice came again, this time clearer, sharper. "You are not alone." Alex froze once more. He couldn't breathe. His mind scrambled to understand. What did they mean? Who were they? Why had they singled him out? The voice didn't offer any more explanation. The words faded, and the screen returned to the same static as before. Alex was left staring at the eerie symbols. With shaking hands, Alex attempted to access the navigation system, hoping against hope that he could break free. The ship lurched again, this time more violently. His body was thrown back against the seat, the force pressing down on him as though some immense weight was bearing down on the Cassandra. He gasped for air, his vision swimming as he fought to stay conscious. Through the blur, he saw the shadow again, this time even closer. It was no longer just a shadow, but a form, a shape that seemed to stretch out across the universe itself. The outline was hard to define, but one thing was clear: it was massive, its proportions impossible to measure, even in the vastness of space. In that moment, Alex understood something. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a ship. It wasn't just an anomaly in space. It was a presence. And it was here for him. The hum reached a crescendo. The sound was deafening now, vibrating the ship so violently that it felt as though the entire vessel was about to break apart. But Alex couldn't focus on that. His mind was racing, processing the implications of the events that had just unfolded. They had known his presence. They had watched him. And now, they were closing in. The shadow outside was no longer at the edge of his view. It filled the viewport. It was immense. The walls of the cockpit shuddered as though the ship itself was being gripped by some unseen force. Alex's fingers trembled as they hovered over the emergency distress signal. He hesitated. The message he had received, it was so cryptic, so cold. If they had the power to reach him across the stars, to silence his communication, what else could they do? And then it hit him. This was not a warning. This was not an attack. It was an invitation. An invitation that was far too dangerous to ignore. The room was cold, but not just from the chill of space. Alex Rider sat in the captain's chair of the Cassandra, staring at the flickering screen in front of him. The hum of the ship seemed louder now, as though it was vibrating through every part of his being. He hadn't felt this alone in his entire life. The silence outside the walls was deafening, broken only by the occasional crackling of static over the comm system. He kept thinking about that message: "It is time." What did it mean? His hands trembled as he reached for the console again. For a brief moment, he thought he had heard something more than just the hum, an echo, perhaps. His mind was racing with questions, theories, possibilities. But with each passing second, he felt further from finding an answer. He glanced around the room. The dim emergency lights cast long shadows across the walls, and the once familiar interior of the ship now felt foreign to him. The Cassandra was no longer the vessel he knew. It was as if it had become part of something else, something darker, more dangerous. The ship had been abandoned by its crew. At least, that's what Alex had thought when he first boarded. He had found the mission log, a hastily abandoned set of notes detailing the crew's descent into fear and paranoia. Something had gone terribly wrong during their mission, and they had been pulled away by an unseen force. But the more Alex read, the more he realized that the events unfolding now were tied to something much older, something beyond anything the crew could have imagined. He tried to focus. There had to be a way to communicate with Earth, to send a distress signal. But the systems, once robust and reliable, were barely responding. The only message he had been able to send had been the cryptic one that had reappeared on the screen, and even that had been nothing but static until the words, "It is time," had appeared. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, sharp noise. A metallic groan reverberated through the ship. Alex's breath caught in his throat. He was no longer alone, not in the way he had been before. Something was out there, something watching. He was no longer sure if it was just the ship that was being manipulated or if the presence he had felt was far greater than he could comprehend. Without thinking, Alex floated to the navigation console. He had to regain control of the ship, somehow. He could feel his pulse quicken as his fingers danced over the buttons, trying to force the ship into action. The same strange symbols that had appeared earlier flashed on the screen once again. The hum grew louder. And then, a voice, different from the one before, but just as chilling, spoke. "We know what you seek." The voice was soft, almost soothing, yet filled with an unsettling calm. Alex's heart skipped. Who was speaking? Where were they? How did they know what he was searching for? His head spun with the implications of the message. This was no coincidence. This was deliberate. And it was happening for a reason. "We know what you seek." The voice was soft, almost soothing, yet filled with an unsettling calm. Alex's heart skipped. Who was speaking? Where were they? How did they know what he was searching for? His head spun with the implications of the message. This was no coincidence. This was deliberate. And it was happening for a reason. "We know what you seek." The voice repeated. Alex's eyes narrowed, his fingers still frozen over the console. What did he seek? The truth? The answers to the questions that had been plaguing his mind since this strange, inexplicable journey had begun? Or was it something more? His mind flickered back to the records he had found in the ship's logs. They had mentioned the black ship, the one that had appeared without warning. It had been a mystery from the start. No one had ever figured out its origin, its purpose. But one thing had been clear, it had been watching them, manipulating their every move. The log entry from Captain Donovan haunted him. "We are being followed," it read. "They are not human. They never were." Alex pushed the memory aside, trying to focus. He had to keep his head on straight. He needed answers, and if this voice, this presence, was offering them, then he had to push forward. He gritted his teeth and punched a command into the system. The screen flickered, displaying more of the strange, cryptic symbols. Then, a new message appeared, one that chilled him to the core. "You cannot escape what you were never meant to know." The words flashed before his eyes, and for a moment, the entire room seemed to shift. The walls around him seemed to bend, warping in an unnatural way. Alex blinked, rubbing his eyes, but the strange sensation remained. Something was happening to the ship, something he couldn't explain. The cold that had been creeping into his bones intensified, and the walls groaned again, as though something within the ship was stretching, pulling, changing. "What do you mean?" Alex demanded aloud, his voice barely a whisper. "What do you want from me?" There was no response, just the unyielding hum and the flickering screen. Frustrated, Alex turned away from the console, his mind racing. He needed to understand what was happening before it was too late. Whatever this was, it was not of human origin. This wasn't a glitch in the system, nor was it some random alien encounter. This was something much more deliberate. Whoever, or whatever, was behind this was far older and far more powerful than anything humanity had ever encountered. He grabbed the ship's manual from the console and flicked through its pages, searching for anything that could explain the mysterious events. The book was mostly filled with technical jargon and mission protocols, but as his eyes scanned the pages, something caught his attention. There, among the outdated technical schematics, was a diagram of the ship's propulsion system, one that included an unexplained anomaly. It was labeled as a fail-safe device. Fail-safe device. Fail-safe device. Alex frowned, trying to make sense of the term. There had been no mention of a fail-safe in the mission brief. Why would there be a fail-safe? And more importantly, why had the crew not mentioned it before? His gaze fell on a note that had been hastily scrawled at the bottom of the page. It was written in Captain Donovan's handwriting. The letters were shaky, as though the captain had been under duress when writing them. The ship wasn't meant to be found. It was a trap. A cold shiver ran down Alex's spine. The ship wasn't meant to be found. Was that why the Cassandra had gone silent? Was this entire mission a trap? He was beginning to think that the answers he had been seeking might be far darker than he had anticipated. His thoughts were interrupted by another sharp, metallic groan. The ship seemed to be trembling now, as if some massive force was pulling it in a direction it had not intended to go. The lights flickered once more, and then, the shadow, it appeared again. This time, it wasn't just outside the window. It was inside. The shadow stretched across the walls of the cockpit, its form stretching impossibly long. It was as though the walls themselves were being consumed by it, and Alex could feel the pressure building around him. He grabbed the console for support, but it was no use. The pressure was too intense. And then, the voice spoke again. "You have seen what was hidden." The words echoed through his mind, reverberating with an intensity that left him breathless. And in that moment, it all clicked. The ship, the messages, the shadow, it was all connected. Alex had uncovered something the universe had been hiding. Something that was never meant to be discovered. And now, he was a part of it. Cliffhanger, the screen flickered once more, and a new message appeared, written in an ancient script, one Alex couldn't recognize. The symbols seemed to twist and change before his eyes, like living creatures. He tried to make sense of them, but the words didn't make any sense. Then, the voice returned, now more urgent than before. "You are the key." The words, "You are the key," hung in the air, filling the cold, dim cockpit with a heavy silence. Alex Rider could feel his pulse thumping in his ears, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. It felt as though something had shifted, not just in the ship, but within him, too. Whatever was happening, whatever had been happening since the moment he boarded the Cassandra, was no longer just about survival. It was personal. And the universe, it seemed, had decided that he was to play a part in its unfathomable game. Alex clenched his fists, fighting the sense of dread creeping up his spine. What did it mean? What did he have to do with any of this? The shadow on the walls, the cryptic messages, the voice that seemed to know his every thought, this was beyond anything he had ever encountered. But the more he resisted it, the more it felt like it was pulling him in. He leaned forward in the chair, gripping the controls as though he could somehow steady the ship's erratic behavior with his hands alone. The ship groaned again, and the walls vibrated in a way that almost felt alive, like the ship was being shaken by an invisible force. The comms crackled with static, the distorted voice echoing once more, now louder and more insistent. "You are the key." The words felt like an electric shock. Alex blinked, trying to clear his mind. What did that mean? He hadn't asked for any of this. All he wanted was to find the truth, to piece together the mystery of the Cassandra and its missing crew. But now, it seemed, the truth was far more complicated than he could have imagined. He pulled up the data logs on the screen, flipping through pages of technical information, but his mind kept wandering back to the voice and the cryptic messages. He had been a part of something far greater than he had ever known. Whatever was happening now, it wasn't just about him or the ship, it was about the fate of something much, much larger. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and the temperature in the cockpit dropped several degrees. Alex shivered, rubbing his arms for warmth. The shadow on the walls seemed to pulse with an ominous energy, as if it was alive, feeding off his fear. His eyes darted around the room, but he saw nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, he could feel it, a presence, just beyond the edges of his vision, lurking in the dark corners of the ship. He couldn't escape it. He couldn't escape what he didn't understand. Then, it happened. The ship lurched violently, throwing Alex against the console. He barely managed to catch himself before slamming into the wall. Panic rose in his chest, but he pushed it down, gritting his teeth and forcing himself to focus. The ship was shaking, more violently than before. The hum of the engines had changed, now erratic and disjointed, as though they were struggling to function. He scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. This wasn't a malfunction. This was intentional. The ship had been taken off course, pulled by some unseen force. He had to regain control, or he would never get out of this. With shaky hands, Alex worked frantically to stabilize the ship, entering commands into the control panel. The screen flashed, giving him a brief moment of hope, but then the lights flickered out entirely. The cockpit was plunged into darkness. "You are the key," the voice repeated, now sounding more distant, more haunting. The pressure in the room seemed to grow, as if the very walls of the Cassandra were closing in around him. Alex's heart was racing now, his breath shallow and rapid. The walls groaned again, the sound reverberating through the ship, and then, silence. The quiet was deafening. For a moment, Alex couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He didn't know what to think. Was it over? Had the ship stabilized? Or had he just entered some deeper layer of this nightmare? And then, the lights flickered back on. But this time, everything was different. The walls of the cockpit were no longer as they had been. The room had changed. The familiar, sterile interior of the Cassandra was now surrounded by a strange, shimmering mist, a swirling mass of colors that didn't belong in the reality Alex knew. It was like stepping into another dimension entirely, a place where the rules of physics didn't apply, and the very air felt alien. He staggered back, trying to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. But it was. And before he could even react, the mist parted, revealing something in the distance, something impossibly vast and dark, looming in front of him. A shadow, larger than the ship itself, seemed to stretch out across the universe. It was an entity, not a ship or a station, but something far older, far more terrifying. Alex could only stare in horror, his eyes wide, as the thing drew closer. It was as though the entire universe was converging on the Cassandra, pulling it toward the darkness, toward whatever this thing was. He felt the ship's momentum change, pulling against him, as though it were being drawn into the gravitational pull of some massive, invisible force. His heart raced, his mind screamed for him to act, but his body couldn't keep up with the overwhelming terror that gripped him. What was this thing? What did it want with him? Before he could form another thought, the voice spoke again. The ship was never meant to be found. Alex's breath caught in his throat. The words seemed to hang in the air like an ominous prophecy. The voice had said that before, but now, it held a new weight, one that made him feel as though everything he had ever known, everything he had ever believed in, was crumbling away. It was true. The Cassandra was never meant to be found. It had been lost, forgotten, and now it was being dragged into the depths of a mystery that Alex was far too small to understand. The ship, the crew, the voice, it was all part of something much larger, something beyond anything he could ever have prepared for. Suddenly, the screen in front of him flickered, showing a series of images that weren't possible. They were symbols, ancient and unfamiliar, swirling together in a way that defied logic. Some of them looked like faces, terrifying, monstrous faces that seemed to reach out from the screen, as though they were trying to escape. And then, in the center of the screen, one word appeared: revelation. "The time has come," the voice intoned. The walls around Alex pulsed with a strange, rhythmic energy. It was as though the entire ship had come alive, its very structure vibrating with the force of whatever was happening. The lights flickered again, and then, the mist that had been surrounding the ship seemed to coalesce into a single point, right in front of Alex. His stomach dropped as he realized what it was. A face. A face made of pure, shifting light, its features constantly changing, like something that was never meant to be seen by human eyes. The face was massive, dwarfing the Cassandra, and its gaze locked with Alex's. For a moment, he was paralyzed, unable to move or look away. Then, the voice spoke once more. "We have been waiting for you." The face before him continued to hover in the air, its features shifting like liquid, impossible to comprehend fully. Each time Alex tried to focus, the face changed again, sometimes it was monstrous, sometimes it was serene, but always it had an overwhelming presence, as if the very idea of it was bending his mind. "We have been waiting for you," the voice repeated, its tone as chilling as it was incomprehensible. Alex's hands trembled, and his breath hitched. His heart pounded in his chest. He had always thought he understood the concept of fear, the human instinct to run or fight. But this wasn't fear. This was a primal, raw feeling of insignificance. It wasn't just the unknown, it was the absolute certainty that whatever this entity was, whatever it represented, it had been waiting for him for a very long time. His eyes darted around the cockpit of the Cassandra, as if looking for a way out, but there was nothing. The room, once familiar and comforting in its sterile technology, had transformed into something alien, something that didn't belong in this universe. The walls, now pulsating with energy, seemed to be closing in on him. He could feel the weight of the entity's gaze on him like 1,000 unseen eyes, all watching, all waiting. "What do you want from me?" Alex finally managed to croak, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. The face shifted again, this time with a slight tilt, almost as if it were considering him. The air grew thick with an unsettling silence. Every second stretched longer than the last, making Alex feel like he was being pulled deeper into an abyss with each passing moment. Then, the face spoke. "You are the last." Alex blinked, not fully understanding what it meant. The last? The last what? His mind raced, but he couldn't find any answers, only more questions. "The last of your kind. The last of those who can remember." The voice sounded almost mournful, as though it carried the weight of centuries, of knowledge and experiences beyond anything Alex could comprehend. "The last to understand what has been hidden from you all." A chill ran through Alex's spine. Understand what? He wanted to scream, to demand answers. But the words caught in his throat. This thing wasn't speaking to him like a normal creature, like a being of flesh and blood. It spoke as though it were the very fabric of existence itself, old, wise, and impossibly vast. Suddenly, a new sound filled the cockpit, a soft, almost imperceptible hum, like the beginning of a song. The walls around him began to ripple, as though they were no longer solid, no longer bound by the same rules of physics that Alex had always known. The mist in the room swirled, growing denser, until it became a mass of bright, shifting patterns, colors and lights that defied logic. Alex's vision blurred as the ship's systems malfunctioned, flickering on and off in rapid succession. He couldn't tell what was real anymore. It felt as though the very ship was being torn apart, but at the same time, it was changing. Transforming into something new. Something far older than any human technology, far beyond his understanding. The entity's voice cut through the chaos again, louder now, reverberating through the very air itself. "You are the key to the door." Alex's heart skipped a beat. The door? What door? And why was he the key? His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening, but the answers weren't coming. Everything was slipping away from him, like sand through his fingers. He took a shaky step back, trying to ground himself, but the room was spinning. The walls were bending in ways they shouldn't. The very air felt thick with anticipation, as if something was about to happen. Something that would change everything. And then, the mist parted. Alex froze, staring at what appeared before him, a door. But not like any door he had ever seen. This one was not made of metal or wood. It was a swirling vortex of light and energy, its surface constantly shifting, changing color, as if it were alive. A doorway to somewhere, to something, to what? The voice came again, now softer, almost like a whisper, but with an undeniable power that sent a shiver down Alex's spine. "You must choose." "Choose what?" Alex demanded, his voice cracking with a mix of fear and desperation. "What do you want me to do? Where am I supposed to go?" The face, if you could still call it a face, smiled, a gesture that was both terrifying and oddly comforting, as if it were the very embodiment of cosmic knowledge. It was a smile that transcended time and space, filled with understanding and sorrow. It is not a matter of where you go, but who you are. Alex's breath caught in his throat. Who I am. The words echoed in his mind, reverberating through the walls of the ship. For the first time, it occurred to him that this wasn't just about the ship, or the crew, or the mysterious message he had uncovered. It was about something far deeper, something more intimate. Something to do with him. You are the last to remember the truth. The truth about what was lost, and why. The voice paused. And you are the one who will decide whether it is forgotten forever, or brought back into the light. The weight of those words hit Alex like a punch to the stomach. The truth? What truth? His thoughts spun wildly as he tried to piece together the fragments of information he had uncovered, fragments that now seemed far too small to comprehend the enormity of what was unfolding around him. The vortex of light before him pulsed with increasing intensity, and Alex felt an almost magnetic pull toward it. He knew, deep down, that whatever it was, it would change everything. It would reveal things he had never even dreamed possible. But was he ready for it? Was he even capable of understanding it? His fingers twitched, and before he knew it, his feet were moving. There was no logic, no reasoning behind it. It was as if something inside him, something buried deep, was guiding him forward, pulling him toward the door. Toward the unknown. He took one step, then another. The ship's walls seemed to blur and fade away, the colors of the mist swirling faster, pulling him in. He didn't know what was waiting for him on the other side of that door, but he knew that he had to step through it. There was no going back. As he reached the threshold, the voice spoke again. Remember this moment, Alex Rider. It will be your last chance. Alex stepped into the vortex. Alex could feel it, the oppressive weight of the void. He had crossed through the threshold, but instead of the bright, alien world he had expected to find, there was only darkness. A vast, infinite blackness that stretched out in every direction. He couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything, but he could feel the presence, something, right there with him. It was like being submerged in deep water, suspended, unable to move or even breathe properly. His senses had been stripped away, leaving only a sense of waiting, of inevitability. The voice, which had echoed so powerfully before, now came again, but it wasn't just the voice. It was everywhere, all around him, like 1,000 whispers layered on top of each other, speaking in one unified sound. You are here. The words hung in the air like a slow, distant hum. It felt as if the voice was not just in his ears, but in his very thoughts. He couldn't escape it, couldn't even escape the profound sensation of being utterly insignificant. You have passed the door, the voice continued, deeper now, richer with layers of something ancient. And now, you must face what lies beyond it. Face what lies beyond it. Alex's mind scrambled to make sense of the words. He had entered the door, but this? This wasn't anything he had expected. The unknown was far more terrifying than he could have imagined. What was this place? And why was he here? Was this the end of everything, or the beginning of something far more dangerous? His thoughts were cut off as a sudden light flickered in front of him. It wasn't the blinding light he had anticipated, instead, it was soft, warm, and almost inviting. Slowly, as if drawn by an invisible force, Alex stepped forward. Every movement felt awkward, like his body wasn't entirely his own. He didn't understand why, but he moved toward the light, guided by something deeper than fear or curiosity. It was as though his very existence depended on it. As Alex walked toward the light, it slowly revealed itself. It was not a traditional light. It swirled, like liquid gold, rippling with colors that he could not name, colors that didn't exist in his world. The edges of the light pulsated in a rhythmic pattern, like the beating of a heart, each pulse sending waves of energy through the void. The air around him seemed to shimmer as the light intensified, and then, without warning, he was no longer alone. A figure appeared before him. The figure was humanoid, but unlike anything Alex had ever seen. Tall, slender, and glowing with a soft ethereal light, it seemed to be made of the same swirling energy that surrounded them. Its features were indistinct, its face was like a blur of shifting shadows and light, yet it radiated an aura of knowledge and ancient wisdom. There was no gender to the being, no race, no recognizable form of humanity. It was something beyond all of that, something old, so old, it felt as if it had witnessed the birth of stars. The figure spoke. "You have come far, Alex Rider. Further than any before you." Alex's heart raced. "Who are you?" His voice sounded alien to him, cracked and uncertain. He had no idea what to expect from whatever this being was, but he knew one thing: he needed answers. "What is this place?" The being tilted its head slightly, as if considering his words. Then, it stepped forward, its presence so powerful that Alex felt his chest tighten with an inexplicable pressure. "This is the Nexus. The center of all things, of time, of space, of existence itself." The voice was clear now, without any distortion, yet it echoed as if from all directions at once. "You stand at the end of all things. And at the beginning of all things." Alex's mind reeled. The Nexus? The end? The beginning? This was beyond anything he could have imagined. His world, everything he thought he knew, was being shattered, piece by piece. "What do you mean?" he asked, though his voice quivered with fear. "What is all of this? Why am I here?" The figure raised its arm, and the swirling light around them intensified. Images began to appear, floating like holograms before Alex's eyes, images of distant planets, alien civilizations, the birth of stars, and the destruction of worlds. It was an overwhelming flood of visuals, too much to comprehend at once. But through the chaos, one image stood out, the image of Earth, his Earth, in all its blue and green beauty, slowly being erased. Not destroyed, not annihilated, but forgotten. As if it never existed at all. "You were meant to forget," the being said softly, its voice carrying a hint of sorrow. "All of you were. Humanity was never meant to remember the truth of what came before. You were meant to live in the illusion of your history, in the comfort of ignorance." The words hit Alex like a punch to the stomach. "What are you saying? What truth?" The being turned its gaze toward him, its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glistening like twin stars. "The truth is this: you, Alex Rider, are the last human who remembers. The last who knows what happened, what was hidden, and why it was erased." Alex's pulse quickened. "No. That's not possible. I don't remember anything like that." "You do not remember because it was taken from you," the being continued, its tone both gentle and final. "The memories of humanity's true past were hidden. Wiped away by those who control the flow of time, the ones who came before." "Who came before?" Alex asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The being's form flickered, and for a brief moment, Alex saw something horrifying. The being's face, in its shifting light, revealed an ancient, weary expression. They were the architects, the ones who shaped this galaxy, who planted the seeds of life across the stars. But they are gone now. They died, and their legacy, your legacy, was erased. The weight of the words crushed down on Alex. Everything he thought he knew about his existence, about Earth, was being unraveled. Why? Why would they do that? The figure's gaze softened, almost as if it were mourning. "Because the truth is dangerous. Because you were never meant to know what was lost. What you were meant to believe, the lie you have been fed for centuries, is nothing more than a construct. A distraction to keep you from understanding your true power." "Power?" Alex's head spun with confusion. "What power? I'm just a man." The being stepped closer, its presence overwhelming. "No, Alex. You are not just a man. You are a key." "A key to what?" The being gestured to the space around them, where the swirling energy continued to pulse. "To the restoration of everything. To the reawakening of the old worlds. You have the knowledge. The memories. The connection to what was lost. And it is you who must decide whether to keep it hidden, or reveal it to the universe." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He had never felt more insignificant in his life, and yet, here he was, standing at the center of it all, with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. The being continued, its voice growing more solemn. "What you do next will determine the future of everything. Will you allow the truth to come back into the light? Or will you let it remain buried, hidden in the shadows of the past?" For the first time in his life, Alex felt the weight of an entire galaxy pressing down on him. He could feel the answers rising within him, memories he didn't know he had. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together. "The choice is yours," the being said. "But know this, whatever you choose, it will change everything." Alex stood there, frozen in the silence. He knew that the future was in his hands now. The truth. The power. The responsibility. He had no idea what would come of it, what the consequences would be, but he knew one thing for sure. The world would never be the same again.